Politicians telling deliberate lies to mislead the public should face criminal charges. That's according to Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price.
Yeah, he's published a draft law which, if successful, could see elected politicians face a fine and disqualification for standing for election if it is proven they knowingly misled the public.
Well, joining us to discuss this, the man behind the proposed law, Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price, and George Garraway, who thinks this law would never work. Well, I have a feeling, George, that most of our viewers agree with you because they think politicians lie all the time.
Yeah, the House of Commons would be empty if Adam's law was to pass.
Now, just to interrupt, we're laughing about that.
Yeah.
But how have we got to a situation where there isn't trust in our politicians? And,
That's a very big subject.
And why is it that politicians feel they can get away with lying?
Well,
I mean, you're both politicians, you're both both accused of lying.
Neither of us actually ever lied. In fact, on the biggest issue of the 21st century, we were both on the same side and we were the ones telling the truth. But one man's lie is another man's terminological inexactitude. It's another
That's
man's...
a great bit of
That was
jargon.
Mr. Churchill, which shows how long this issue goes back. It's another man's economy with the actuality.
Or it's another man's propaganda or woman's propaganda.
Yeah, and politics is about that. I just think it's a big mistake to bring the law into politics. It would be terrific for lawyers. It would lead to a bonanza of cases. But who will guard the guards? Judges are drawn from the narrowest possible strata of society. You don't elect them and you cannot remove them. Politicians, hopefully, from a wider strata, and they are elected, John, and they can be removed.
As you well know, I mean, the consequences of tolerating a situation where, you know, those who lead us can mislead us, right, and get away with it with impunity are very, very grave indeed. I mean, in the case of Iraq, of course, you know, we're talking of people's lives are at stake when we're talking about, you know, peace or war. So, yes, OK, political lying is nothing new, but it's become an epidemic recently, isn't it? I mean, the Washington Post on the other side of the Atlantic, they calculated recently since President Trump became president, he's lied 15 times a day, over 15,000 cases.
That's fewer than the Washington Post. You see, the Washington Post.
Is that the truth, or are they telling a lie?
Well, exactly. See where we get to.
Well, shall we have a look? Shall we have a look at some stated political facts that other people would say are lies? I mean, for instance, £350 million for the NHS plastered across the side of a bus during the Brexit referendum. Remainers would say, I'm sure there are Remainers who would say that's a lie. And Brexiteers would say that's not a lie. That actually is true, that once we leave the EU, there will be £350 million available. In fact, Boris Johnson even said there'll be more than that available for the NHS. Now, is that a lie, or is that just looking at figures in a different way, depending on your political viewpoint?
Well, you know, I think the case of political lying, I think what we're talking about is...
I'm talking about this case, because would you then take Boris Johnson to court? Because someone tried to, and it failed.
Well, because, of course, currently we don't have a law about political lying. I mean, there are one exception.
But hang on, do you think that was a lie?
I think the evidence that I've seen, suggests that that was a deliberate attempt to mislead. Because if you look,
is that different to a lie, though?
Well, no.
It's policing that, isn't it? What is spin? As Susanna say, looking at figures and looking at figures that suit your narrative, or what is actually an all-out lie?
I think you're right. There is a continuum, isn't there? There's embellishment. There's, as George said, being, economical with the actuality, etc. But then there are cases. I mean,
hang on. So you said that was a deliberate attempt to mislead. Does that then pass the threshold?
I don't.
For your
I don't want to have trial by media here. So I mean,
well, hang on. You want to introduce a law which prosecutes politicians for lying? That's exactly what we're doing.
No. It shouldn't be trial by media, or it should be trial by somebody like. It should be one politician.
By a judge.
It shouldn't be
by an unelected judge.
It should be in the case of a criminal offence. The police should investigate. The director of public prosecution should decide: is there sufficient evidence?
Someone has to turn around and say, "I think that's a lie."
In order for it to be charged.
Keir Starmer or someone.
You have to have somebody objective to decide. Look, look, what does the evidence say? Give you another example. During the election campaign, we had all sorts of
sorry. If you are proposing this law, you must have in mind whether things which people have called lies should then be prosecuted. And would you think that in the case of 350 million?
I have my view about the Iraq War, which actually George shares with me on that. I have a view on the Brexit bus where George and I disagree.
Yeah,
the point
that's why I'm trying to get to that point.
The point is that it shouldn't be up to other politicians to call out whether a lie has happened because of the consequences. There should be an objective...
George,
there should be an
if Adam decided to go to the police and say all the politicians who'd stood next to the bus and said £350 million will be available to the NHS, would you think that would be a good use of police time?
No, it would be absurd. The House of Commons would be full of police officers and the lawyers would be waiting outside, ambulance chasing, every time a politician made a speech. Only an informed electorate can make that judgment.
George,
do we believe that person and that thing that he said?
Why should politics be the last unregulated profession? If a tradesman or woman, right, makes a misleading claim about a product, they can not only be prosecuted, they can actually go to prison. Whereas a politician can make a statement about something which has, consequences for millions of people, and we say that's fine.
In the case of that claim, it depends on your political viewpoint whether it is true or not.
No, what we're saying here is, look, if it can be demonstrated that a statement has been deliberately made to manipulate the electorate for political gain, as in when you made that statement, when you made that statement, you knew that wasn't true, and yet you said it anyway because you felt that you could gain political advantage.
But if you're talking about deliberately misleading people, we saw in this election campaign a number of occasions it felt like all the parties were guilty of deliberately trying to mislead the electorate. We had the Lib Dems printing
the bar charts.
We're just behind.
The fake newspapers.
But their argument will be, we made it very clear that was Lib Dem manifesto policy, and actually just because it looked like a local newspaper, we weren't misleading anybody. They all knew, although one of our colleagues saw it.
It's sharp practice. But if you're going to eliminate sharp practice from politics, there won't be any politics left.
But do we not, George?
We have a shrunken and often degenerate political class, but that's our fault.
But
because we keep re-electing them.
George, we have had...
Sorry, the Lib Dems say that was all OK by the board. Yeah, exactly right.
But
and that it wasn't deliberately misleading.
I'll give you another example from this very programme. Yeah, the famous Keir Starmer interview that was edited, right? Piers himself said that it was edited deliberately to give a false, unfair, and misleading view.
Shall we just have a quick look at what you're referring to?
And when you called them up, they did it again.
Here we go.
Why would the EU give you a good deal if they know that you're going to actively campaign against it? Well, which is clearly what most of you are going to be doing.
Well, Piers, I have been talking to the EU, to political leaders across the EU 27 countries for 3 years. And I know very well what the parameters are of any deal that they would do with a Labour government.
On the left, you had the original interview where Keir Starmer answered the question. On the right, the Tories had re-edited it to make it look like he didn't know.
It is, and they lost out of it. Because when Piers weighed in and said, this is misleading the public, the Tories scored an own goal. And that's the only way we can do it. Look, politics has to be a marketplace where all contending points of view fight it out, and the public make a judgment. You can't have judges making these decisions.
What actually happened, they were called out. They then put a new version out, which was also misleading. And, of course, it got a kind of, hundreds of thousands of hits. It was a deliberate attempt to put out a lie out there because they knew that would, gain traction.
Adam, do you think a law like this would restore the public's faith and trust in politicians? Because it's at such a low ebb. Every single message we've had has been about the fact that politicians lie, Parliament would be empty, no one believes politicians anymore.
And police have got enough to do.
Exactly.
If not making a criminal offence, here's a counter-proposal, right? We have the Advertising Standards Authority. If one of your sponsors makes a lie during the advertising of this programme, the Advertising Standards Authority causes them to stop the advert. Why don't we do the same for
George, do you think it would succeed? Adam's proposal?
I'd support that amendment, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. I would think that an objective panel could say the statement fact check. That's fine.
And fact check and bring them
fine.
to sort
but
of order.
you can't bring the law into democratic politics.
They'd be very busy as well, wouldn't they?
There would be
Who says
unbelievable.
compromise was dead?
Oh, yeah.